Welcome to HortTube, where we talk all things gardening. My name is Jim Putnam, and this is a Blue Rug Juniper. This is Blue Rug Juniper, a low-growing ground cover juniper that has beautiful blue-green foliage. Blue Rug Junipers are primarily grown as a ground cover and only reach about 6 inches in height, and they can grow 8 to 10 feet in width over time. Blue Rug Junipers are extremely cold hardy and can grow in the majority of the continental United States. These will grow all the way up into zone 3, which is extremely cold winter temperatures, and all the way down to zone 9. Blue Rug Junipers will likely grow fairly slowly when you first plant them. You might get 2 or 3 inches of growth all the way around the plant in the first year. By the second or third, maybe fourth year, you'll probably be getting about a foot in width each year. Blue Rug is definitely a sun-loving plant. This thing needs to be in at least a half a day's sun all the way up to full sun. Blue Rug is primarily used as a ground cover. It's fantastic for growing on banks and slopes where you need to control some erosion problems. It also works well as a foundation plant in front of other foundation plants, maybe along a sidewalk. You just have to be careful if that space tends to stay wet. Some people you'll see put these around their mailboxes and that kind of thing right down at the base of them. Also works fantastic as a container plant. It'll actually weep down over your container or over a retaining wall in time. Blue Rug Junipers have a beautiful blue-green hue to the foliage. Another nice thing about them is they're actually kind of soft to the touch. A lot of these junipers can be very, very prickly. You will want to wear gloves with them though, because some people get very itchy when they're handling junipers. In terms of planting your Blue Rug Junipers, this plant is not going to want to stay wet between rains or between waterings. So it's important that they drain well. Usually when you're planting these on a slope, the slope's going to just naturally drain pretty well. If it's a heavy clay soil, I would mix in some pine bark soil conditioner, which you can get at most garden centers, and just mix that 50-50 with the clay that comes out of the hole. So dig your hole to the depth of the root ball. Now you've got that little pile of clay sitting on the side of the hole. Mix that with the pine bark. Use that material to replant it. If you were down at the coast, and this will grow in a coastal area, you can mix some compost or some peat moss in to hold a little bit of water in between rains. If you're somewhere in the middle where like a sandy loam or something, I wouldn't worry about it. Just dig the hole, put them in the ground, elevate them a little bit. And by elevate, I mean, once you have your soil mix, whatever that is, and you've dug it to the depth of the root ball, put some of that back in the bottom of the hole, so that when you pull your plant out of the container and put it in the hole, it's actually elevated just a little bit, and that will prevent it from staying waterlogged. And then pull the rest of your soil up to the edge of the root ball, tamp it down, water it in. And then we'll need to mulch these. It's important, especially when you're trying to establish a ground cover, that you're not allowing a lot of grass to grow between them. And so if you have pine straw available in your area, it's really the best thing to use, especially on a slope. It tends not to wash away as bad as some bark mixes would or hardwood mulch. If it's a bank that a lot of water drains through it, you'll end up losing a lot of that mulch at some point. So pine straw would be best. If it's not available to you, use hardwood mulch, that's fine. But don't cover anything that wasn't covered when you planted it. You'll have to mulch and then go back in and pull at these limbs some and get them freed from the mulch and get the mulch away from them a little bit. It will burn them, and it will also hold way too much water in place and eventually waterlog these and could potentially kill them. This is an undersized 3-gallon plant. This will probably be sold next year, and it'll end up being, this wide around the container. You might get something this big in a 1-gallon plant already, and if it's like that, it's almost certainly going to be very root bound when you buy it, meaning that when you pull it out of the container, the roots are going to be wrapped just solid in the container. That almost certainly in a 1-gallon plant the plant's out over the edge of the container, that's going to be the case. Make sure you pull at those roots some before you stick the plant in the hole and get them going outward instead of continuing to wrap around one another. If you're planting your juniper on a foundation, once this thing's established, I don't think you'll need to water it at all. Just foundations tend to stay a little wetter. If you're in an area that receives, fairly average rainfall a couple times a month or more, then you should be fine. If you're putting this on a slope, especially while you're trying to establish it, you're probably going to have to water this a few times during the summer to keep it growing. It wouldn't hurt it if it got dry and a little stressed, but it would stop growing, which kind of defeats the purpose of them. So when you're planting these on a slope, I would recommend that you get a drip hose and run it along whatever layout you have on these so that you can hook your water hose to it and water that entire bank at one time. Keep in mind that water goes downhill, so run your drip hose above them won't do you any good to water below them. And that's probably the best way to water these. And I think a few times a summer is probably going to be necessary, depending on how much of a slope you have. While you're trying to establish your junipers as a ground cover, I would definitely fertilize these. These are acid-loving plants, so any fertilizer that's slow release for acid-loving plants would be great. I actually throw some holly tone on some ones that I have, and it keeps a really nice greenish blue color all summer, and also keeps them growing as long as they've got moderate moisture. In terms of pruning your blue rug junipers, you can do it anytime you need to, really. If you're growing them next to a sidewalk and they come out on the sidewalks, you can cut them off anytime. If they're too far down over a retaining wall, you can just give them a haircut across the bottom. It's no big deal. I'd probably, if you have these growing on a slope and they get really, really thick, you might consider thinning them in the future occasionally, and they might look bad for a little while, but it might be helpful to them to prevent them from holding too much water in place. In terms of insect or disease problems on blue rug juniper, the big issue is really going to be root rot on these. They do get a few insect issues occasionally if they're under stress. I've seen bagworms on them actually if they're very, very stressed, and spider mites is another potential issue. But like I said, the main issue you're going to have are root rot issues. Blue rug becomes its own worst enemy in time. It's actually very, very good at collecting all the leaves that blow into it and all the debris and trash that blow into it. And then it mats down very, very closely to the ground. So an area that you planted that was very, very dry when you first planted it can become actually wet in time. So thinning these every few years is probably a good idea, and make sure that when leaves are falling in the fall, if they're in an area that can blow into these, that you're cleaning them up. So what are you waiting for? Even you can grow the low maintenance, low to the ground, ground cover blue rug juniper. Thank you for watching my video, and if it was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Also, comment below with any questions you have about any kind of ground cover. Thanks for watching.